Thank you. In terms of remarks for today, I'm going to keep my remarks brief because we do have such an ambitious agenda. I want to make sure that all of the commissioners and those watching at home got the save the date for the Maryland Student Success Summit that MHEC is planning. It will be occurring on Friday, November 15th, with a dinner for presidents and board chairs the night before on Thursday, November 14th. We have there will be a planning to include the leaders of higher education will be happening over the next weeks and months. And so stay tuned for more information, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone has that date on their calendar. I understand that we have no public comments, but I will turn it over to the secretary before we delve into the meeting minutes approval.
Thank you, Chair Moss. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our meeting. I also want to extend my very, very warm welcome to our new student commissioner, Praise Alaide, a fellow mathematician and double major. I didn't do the double major, but a presidential and leadership excellence scholar at Coppin State University. We are absolutely delighted to have you here. We have an ambitious agenda. Today, you will hear about regulatory changes in Promise Scholarship. It's a scholarship for community college students, last dollar scholarship. Now this scholarship is available to more students, part-time students. As you know, majority of our students at community colleges are part-time. So they will be able to access this important last dollar scholarship. And also our community colleges have lots of non-credit students. Now, from this year, this scholarship will also be available to part-time students and non-credit students who are in different certificate programs. All these efforts is to make financial aid more accessible to students who need that. You will hear more our other efforts where we are trying to make this entire experience of accessing to these important scholarship easier for students. You will hear an update on RFP proposal that we have out there to change the entire scholarship platform, making it easier for the students. You will also hear about several regulatory changes that are coming due to academic program work group that General Assembly assembled earlier this year. This will also make our program approval process more transparent, clearer, and I guess more open. So improvements are being made in both areas, academic program approval, and also in the financial aid areas. I think those are the two areas that have been important for the last several years. But we are not stopping there. Under our Vice Chair Agu's leadership, we are working on 2030 completion goals. And in future meetings, you will hear more about them as well. So Chair Martz, back to you. Let's get started. I have a request that I just got. Our Director for Financial Aid is stuck in traffic. So he's running just a little late. So can we make some changes in the agenda? So Dr. Dow could go first with academic program regulatory changes, and he can follow later.
Absolutely. First, let's address the minutes from the April meeting, and then we'll dive right into academic affairs. I hope that my fellow commissioners have received the commission meeting minutes from April 24th, and I'm wondering if there is a motion, if there's any discussion before we make a motion to approve the minutes. Any discussion? All right, do I have a motion to approve the April 24th minutes? Commissioner Howe?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Burnham. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? All right, the minutes are approved. Now turning to the Department of Academic Affairs and Dr. Emily Dow, we have 3 different sets of regulations to consider today. And I just want to set the stage because different things are being asked of us, commissioners, for different commissions. There are 2, well, let me back up. There's one set of proposed bylaws, and there are 2 sets of proposed commissions, regulations. So the the first item is proposed bylaws for the Program Review Process Advisory Council. The second proposed amendments relate to the Commission's review of academic program proposals. And then there's a second set of regulations that today is just a preview for us that we're not being asked to vote on. So we're only being asked to vote on the first two matters, the bylaws and the first set of regulations. And just to set the stage, my understanding from Dr. Dow is that the reason that we're doing things in this order is because, of course, we are driven by the spirit of transparency and equity. We are following up on the legislature's bill that they passed, HB 1244, related to the academic program approval process that passed this past legislative session. And there are several things required in the law and regulations required of the agency to write. And so the agency decided to tackle the bylaws for the council first, so that as soon as those bylaws are established, we commissioners can have the benefit of the council that is benefit of the advice and guidance of the council that is required by the legislature. So that is why we are addressing that first. Secondly, with respect to the amendments, the regulations related to academic program review, again, we want to enact what the legislature has set out for us as quickly as possible in terms of reforming our own practices, the way that we run our meetings. The agency, of course, is very much in favor of these changes. Secretary Rye and I testified in favor of them. But again, trying to get the process right so that we can have the benefit of this council and we can change the way we run our meetings and then dive into the more substantive pieces. So that is why Dr. Dow and Dr. Rye have decided to go about things in this order. And then finally, the second set of regulations that we're not being asked to vote on today, this is more of a preview. Dr. Dow has been working with a group of stakeholders from the higher education segments to get their input on this substantive piece, and in particular, the regulatory standard for the definition of substantial modification. This work group started meeting in March before the law actually officially passed because MHEC wanted to get a jump on it. They've met several times already, and the regulations will come to us for a vote potentially at the next meeting in August that we have. But Dr. Rye and Dr. Dow and the group of stakeholders wanted us to get a preview to make sure that we understood what was going on and really to hear from us as to whether we had any input since the segments are already weighing in. So I just wanted to set the stage of what's being asked of us today and why we're doing things in this order. I'm sure Dr. Dow can elaborate, but that is my understanding, and I will turn it over to Dr. Dow.
Thank you, Chair Motz, and that was a perfect introduction. I appreciate that. Good morning, commissioners. Just as Chair Motz has outlined, there are 3 items in front of you. Let's start with the first one. You'll find it on page 17 of your commission book. We, as part of House Bill 1244, there is a new advisory council focused on the program review process. As you heard at last month's meeting, there are a number of process changes that the agency will need to make, and we thought it would be beneficial to get this advisory council up and going as the space and expertise to weigh in on these process changes as we update regulations and implement them. So what you have before you are proposed bylaws for this program review process advisory council. The bylaws are generally your standard bylaws, allowing the meetings to be virtual, setting expectations about who is to chair. What I would draw your attention to is the composition of the council and what we have prepared for you. Every segment leader or segmental representative will have a seat at the table, along with a mix of presidents and provosts from each of the segments. And as a reminder, when we say segments, we mean community colleges, the USM institutions, Morgan, St. Mary's, and our private and independent institutions. Those are our typical traditional 5 segments. And so making sure that we have a diverse group of senior leaders who can opine, weigh in, and provide advice on these new forthcoming changes in the program review process. I will stop there, and I'm happy to answer questions. You will see at the bottom of the memo, it is recommended that the commission adopt the attached bylaws for the Program Review Process Advisory Council, but I can repeat that recommendation at a later time in this meeting after questions.
So again, this council is required by law. The legislature passed HB 1244. And so this is just the bylaws that put that council into practice. Are there any discussion or questions from commissioners? Commissioner Agu.
One quick question. Just want to understand the recommendations that are made by this council. Do those recommendations come back to the commission for approval, or is it, or just in terms of what they recommend? Tell me what the process is for that to become enacted.
Exactly. Yes. So they would come back to you all. Sometimes the recommendations may not have full consensus. We would make an effort to document that so that you are aware of kind of a variety of recommendations. But yes, this is an advisory council to the commission to implement and review program review process elements.
Thank you.
Commissioner Howe.
I wanted to know if our attorney from the Attorney General's office has looked at these proposals.
Absolutely. And in fact, Ms. Katia, our Assistant Attorney General, took the lead in drafting them. So they have not only been drafted by our AAG, but certainly reviewed by Kimberly Ward as well, Ms. Ward.
All right,
So
thank you.
They've been approved for legality and legal sufficiency by the Office of the Attorney General.
All right, that's what I wanted to know.
Good question. Commissioner Dukes and then Commissioner Bands.
It's just a quick question with regard to timeline. Does this in any way impact the timeline in terms of when we receive something, when the review begins, and then when it comes back to the commission? Are we still bound to the same timeline in terms of decision making, or has it been expanded?
We are still bound to the same timeline. This advisory council is charged with just providing insight on process. So they will not provide any opinions or insight on a particular proposal or a particular program. Instead, this is about process. So, for example, we will need to develop a separate process for fully online programs that are intended for out-of-state students. Before we engage in developing that process, we want to convene this group to help us develop that process together. So it's about process and not any one particular proposal.
So the timeline begins in terms of the response from the commission when we receive it.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So we would come back to the commission with proposed changes in our processes, and you would proceed as you see fit.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bands and then Commissioner Serrano and Dr. Rai, in that order.
Thank you. As a new member of the commission, I wonder if you can clarify for me the quorum. I'm used to bylaws where the stipulation for the quorum is usually stated as a percentage of the members. So I just wanted to better understand the term.
Sure. So we have identified quorum in the proposed bylaws as the presence of a majority of the members then serving on the council, and that should constitute a quorum.
So when excuse me, when you say majority, 51% is, I'm just trying to.
That is my understanding. I would defer to our AGs in case I have that wrong.
It would essentially just be more than half rather than a percentage. So with 12 commissioners, it would be 7 is a quorum. If there's, well, I mean, that's commissioners, but for this, I believe there's 21 members, so a quorum would be 11.
Mhm.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Commissioner Serrano.
Yeah, just mine's more minor. On open meetings requirements, like I know sometimes we go into like closed session and we deliberate there. How can we still do that, or is everything on the table? Do we have to be in open meetings for everything?
Because this is, and again, I'll take I'll try to answer your question, but I defer to our AAGs in case I get anything wrong. This is an advisory council that is required to adhere to the Public Meetings Act. I don't believe that there is an expectation that this advisory council will go into executive section because they are not making decisions. They are making recommendations that would then go towards the commission.
Okay, thanks.
Dr. Rai? I'm sorry.
That's correct.
Thank you, Assistant Attorney General Ward. Dr.
So-
Rai and then Commissioner Alide.
So Dr. Dow has already explained this. This group will only advise on the process. They will not give any recommendation on any specific academic program proposal.
Okay. Commissioner Alide.
When I was looking at this yesterday, I was looking at the permanent members and how are they chosen? And I was wondering, I don't believe Morgan's why is the president of Morgan State University or their designee and the president of St. Mary's College a permanent member?
Great question. Thank you. So Morgan State University and St. Mary's College of Maryland are two of our public four-year institutions that sit outside of the university system of Maryland. So we want to make sure they have dedicated seats so that University System of Maryland will have a seat, the Maryland Association of Community Colleges, Maryland Independent Association of Colleges and Universities, as well as, and so those three organizations represent several institutions. Morgan and St. Mary's are their own independent representatives, so they would get their own dedicated seat.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Serrano.
Yeah. What was like the reasoning why there's no student members or as permanent members? Like it just seems like there's a lot of university administrators, but there's no students on this.
Great question. Because the academic program review process is usually at an administrative level, we typically are not consulting with students about processes around academic program review. But if certainly commissioners feel that a student member is warranted, we can add that. But because this is an administrative task about the development of academic programs, how MHEC reviews the academic program, the requirements, it is an administrative process.
If I could just say, like, I think this has been my ongoing complaint about program reviews, is that we focus too much on the institutions and not on the students. We have one university wants to complain about the other university starting a program and it's in competition with that university. And from the standpoint of the student, competition might be good, right? We want to have two good programs compete with one another. Maybe one program focuses on one thing, the other program focuses on the other thing. But we don't have students at the table. We don't have that perspective.
Your point is noted, Commissioner Serrano. Thank you. Assistant Attorney General Cadia.
I just wanted to note that HB 1244 did actually change the law with regard to harm. So the law is no longer actually harm towards universities. It's harm towards students attending institutions of higher education in the state or the state as a whole. So that standard has changed. And that's certainly something that you could think about in terms of some of the process issues if students should be involved. But for this particular council, as to how the processes are made. It's really, I mean, this is very separate from the actual review process of the proposals. So the student perspective is not really, I mean, the students don't have anything to do with submitting proposals, if you know what I mean. And that's what this council's more about.
I just think the feedback from students is super about. It's really important. I think it's just there's things that students would consider loan burden, kind of the programmatics, so like the options of choice, focus, that I think sometimes administrators don't really quite capture. And I think it's important to have their voices there.
Any other thoughts or comments? Commissioner Lydic, speaking of students.
Speaking of students, like I really agree with Dr. Serrano or Commissioner Serrano, because like I feel like in every aspect it may not be like, they might say, it might be said that, oh, like they can't really contribute, but them being there can be an asset. Or for them to say, look, I was a part of this policy. I was here, my voice was heard, even if they can't, like, they might not understand everything, but them there can be such an asset, not only to them, but just to their community as well. So.
Thank you to both of you, Commissioner Serrano and Commissioner Lydic. I think MHEC is making a concerted effort to be more student focused. Absolutely. It is a student serving agency. Before I go on, I see Commissioner Dukes has a comment.
Right. The only thing I would say, certainly as a former college administrator, is that orientation to this process would be very important, because to have a student on a panel just for a student's sake means nothing if they cannot understand what the process is all about. So I would just say, whatever decision is made, make sure that we are being clear and upfront and forthright in terms of the purpose, and then orientation to what this process is, and certainly where students' voices are needed and respected in that process.
Absolutely. Commissioner Thompson and then Commissioner Agu.
Yes, thank you. In that same vein, then, is there a way in which the outcomes from this committee can be at least reported to students or student group or to Student Government Association, so that they have an awareness of what this group is doing?
Absolutely. So there are a number of other advisory councils to the commission. You heard two of them at last month's meeting, the Faculty Advisory, and in this instance, the Student Advisory Council. So I can make a commitment that what comes of the program review process advisory council is shared in collaboration with the Student Advisory Council, and give them an opportunity to weigh in. And we can use those meeting spaces to provide that background information so that they understand what they are reviewing in more detail.
That would be great. I think that would be
I
great.
can make a commitment.
Thank you.
I actually go a step further here. Again, I'm trying to square a circle. One way to two things that I would do formally is I actually would, if we can include in here, a formal sharing of recommendations of this new advisory council be shared with the Student Advisory Council, so that they can formally give feedback. I actually think that I'd actually make that. We do have a group of students who actually are part of our process, and let's use that formally so that they can give feedback. Which might be logistically easier than potentially putting on a student member. That's just one take. The other thing that I would do is this may be against kind of protocol and procedure, but I actually think we should give formal instruction to the council and beyond what's in the legislation to say, and we are specifically looking for the inclusion of student interest and student voice as part of the recommendations that you make. That can be verbal. I don't know if that has to be part of the bylaws, but I might say those two things. I actually would include a formal sharing of their recommendations with the Student Advisory Council, and then also this commission giving formal instruction on making sure that whatever recommendations that they include, that they create, and then in the end, these recs, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, still do come back to MHEC And if we feel that those interests have not been taken into account, we can ask for additional recommendations, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so those are my two humble recommendations in terms of amendments here. Formal sharing with the SAC, and then formal instruction from us on keeping student interest centered. And that will be a condition of our approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Agu. Other questions or comments about these recommended bylaws for the council? All right, Commissioner Agu, I believe you were suggesting a couple of amendments.
Yeah, I think only really one. I think in terms of formal instruction, to be honest, I think on the formal instruction, Madam Chair, I think a quick note from you and the secretary saying what I just said, I think is easy. I don't know if that's being bylaw, but I would share, I'm not sure exactly where it should go, but I would say something like 30 days before final recommendations will be shared with the Student Advisory Council for their feedback, something like that. And I'm not sure what part that best goes in. I'm going through this really quickly. Potentially that's a new section, but I'm just looking here. Maybe potentially it's a new section 16 after quorum. Right now, the current section part 16 is public comment. Maybe right before that, it's sharing with Student Advisory Council for their feedback. That's what I might say. Does that make sense? And my OHE colleagues, please tell me if there's a better way to state that.
Assistant Attorney Generals Ward and Kadia, anything to add to Commissioner Agu's proposed amendment?
No, actually, that's a good place to put it and a good way to phrase it. So certainly if someone wants to amend the recommendation to add that.
I formally move as I just stated to add that amendment.
Second.
Commissioner Dukes, question, or are you voting?
Well, I was going to ask a question, but we can vote and then I can ask my question. It's not contingent upon the vote.
Okay. We have a motion from Commissioner Agu, a second from Commissioner Howe. All those in favor of Commissioner Agu's amendment, say aye.
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 Any abstention or opposition? All right, the ayes have it. Commissioner Dukes, the floor is yours.
So the only thing that I would ask of the secretary and Dr. Dow is to really look at this and determine if timelines are appropriate for all of this to go through. That if we're going to request and actually expect that the Student Advisory Council weigh in, institutions cannot be looking at a process that's going to be 6 months long or a year long as they're debating through. So I just think that we have to be cognizant of that as well. It takes a while to change a program, to set up a new program, all of those kinds of things. So we need to be cognizant of timing for institutions to be responsive as well.
Good point.
I think just to respond, just to Commissioner Dukes quickly, definitely on the amendment that we just made, this is really for the Student Advisory Council to respond to the recommendations of this advisory council. Definitely how that council may be involved in actual program review is a different question. That is for the commission to work out. And I totally agree, but definitely I want to be clear. This is just about making sure that the recommendations on the process recs have that student input that you heard Dr. Serrano and our new student commissioner give. So I just want to be clear about that.
No, absolutely. And I understood that. I just always think about, we get it, then we take 2 weeks, or we take 30 days, or we take 60 days. That's what I'm asking.
Fair.
Good point. So we voted on and approved Commissioner Agu's amendment. I think we need to formally actually vote on the recommendation of the agency that our commission adopt the bylaws for the Program Review Process Advisory Council. So do we have a motion to approve the bylaws?
Madam Chair, I so move.
Thank you,
Second.
Commissioner Berman. Second by Commissioner Howe. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any abstentions or nays? All right, the ayes have it. Thank you all for your careful consideration. Moving
Great.
on to our next agenda item, Dr. Dow, these are proposed regulations related to how the commission conducts our meetings. And you are, if the commission is in a position to vote on these regulations today, your recommendation is that we vote. Before you describe them, I just want to be very clear that, again, these regulations stem from House Bill 1244 that was passed by the legislature this past session, with which MHEC agreed and testified in favor. And there are certain things required by the law that these regulations are implementing. Specifically, HB 24 requires that our review meetings be conducted in open session, including discussions and any formal action taken. HB 1244 requires that each institution have 10 minutes to present to the commission without interruption at the beginning before any questions are asked. And HB 1244 also requires that any commission decision coming out of a review meeting be approved by a majority of the members then serving on the commission. So those things are required by the law. These regulations take that into account. And there are other tweaks that Dr. Dow is going to describe, but I just want to make clear those are set forth in law. So Dr. Dow, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Again, this memo starts on page 22. For clarity, you have two versions of the proposed changes. One is a track changed version that starts on 24, and then what we would call a clean version with all the track changes accepted. That starts on page 31. So just want to make sure that you're clear that there are two versions depending on how you like to read changes. Again, you see Chair Motch just walked through the requirements set by House Bill 1244 regarding the review meeting and review meeting expectations when a proposed program is being reviewed by the commission. There are some additional changes that we have added in terms of what kinds of materials need to be submitted, who should be presenting, and some other changes as well. I will stop there and happy to answer questions and provide some additional clarification as needed.
Commissioner Agu.
A couple quick questions. When I went through this before, let me just tell me if I missed it. One of the things that I did not see here, this may not be the right place for it, the labor market demand data in terms of that being kind of the single source of truth on what is demand and what's not. I do not see that reflected here. And maybe this is not the right place. If it's not, just tell me that's totally fine. But that is a thing that, from my two experiences with this, was one of the biggest sources of pain. Does that need to be formally said here, or is that going to be handled in another part of the process?
It will be handled in another part of the process and in another part of our regulation.
Right. Question two, due to the wisdom of our chair, we, for the first time, actually wrote explanations for our decisions in a timely manner for every decision. I do not see that reflected here. I know that we do that, but if there's not a chair as wise as our current chair going forward, I actually think that should be part of our regulations. I think it is a huge benefit to the space. Again, is this the place to address that? Number one, and then number two, just any issues with that underlying.
Sure. So on page 30 in the track changes version, let me draw your attention to. And
if I missed it, I apologize.
No, that's okay. It's important because what we have drafted as of right now is that, okay, so you go through the review meeting, you're going to make a public vote, you're going to do a roll call vote. As soon as that is done, not later than 5 business days after the review meeting, the secretary.
I totally see it here. I apologize. I see it right here. Okay, thank you.
Document the outcome of the review meeting, including any conditions. Yeah.
Withdrawn then. And then one last question. In terms of exactly who is speaking, particularly presidents, chancellors, was that those are high level people? Obviously, we want them in the meetings, but I forgot if there was room for designee as well in those, or just if you can clarify that.
Absolutely. So on page 26, about halfway down, it's new text. Each president will have 15 minutes without interruption to present to the commissioner. The president may delegate a portion of the presentation to the chief academic officer. No other individuals may speak without prior permission of the commission chairperson. So there can be some delegation, but some negotiation with the commission chairperson.
Those are all my questions. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Other questions or comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Serrano.
Yeah, so my understanding is that the president of the, like institution A and again, institution B, those two presidents have 15 minutes to present without interruption. At what point and how much time do the commissioners have to ask questions?
There is no limit to how long the kind of open discussion Q&A process would happen. So there's now no longer that limit. There is a 15-minute presentation from each of the two institutions, and then the commissioners have open time for Q&A to both the secretary, commission staff, and institutional speakers.
Is it equal time for each institution, or could we do 30 minutes one institution, 5 minutes for the other one?
So it's each institution will have 15 minutes to present without interruption.
No, but like for the questions, like so the commissioners have a lot of questions for one institution, no questions for the other one.
It will be completely up to you all how you want to spend that time. There's no time limit and no time obligation.
Another thing I just want to point out for those of us who have lived through having some of these hearings, that there are some key changes that are in the regulations and are set forth by Dr. Dow in her memo on page 23. For those who have been here a year and had hearings, you'll remember that there used to be a rebuttal period. These regulations get rid of the rebuttal. You'll also remember that the way that it used to work was that after the secretary had made his or her decision, the secretary presented the position of that institution to us as commissioners. These regulations change that and say, the secretary decided what he or she decided, but in front of us, each institution presents its own description or case. And so I think, again, this is in a spirit of transparency and equity and simplification. But I just wanted to note for those of us who are used to doing it a certain way, at least for a couple of hearings, those are some key changes. Any questions, comments, concerns, proposed amendments?
Just have a question, Madam Chair, regarding, I guess it's item 9 on page 30.
Yes, sir.
Or if the commission was not able to come to a decision. Just curious, what might have prompted that caveat? Case where we had 10 commissioners present and the vote was 5-5, or where the, just what is that intended to alleviate?
I'm going to let Assistant Attorney General Kadia answer that one, please.
That's exactly it. Or for instance, if for some reason only 8 commissioners can come to a review meeting, but it's split 4 and 4, sort of an example. And so therefore we don't have that majority. There has to be a default that happens if a decision can't be reached, either to, change it or not change it.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
Commissioner Serrano?
Yeah, I think my question's on page 29. It said I guess I brought this point up before, but all discussions and deliberation shall be an open session. Is that ever going to be subject to change? Because I just feel like it chills speech. I like when we're deliberating on stuff, sometimes we'll say we don't buy the arguments from that university. I just don't want to come across as saying that publicly, saying, you know, I don't believe these people, when I just feel like because I mean, I think sometimes it is tough, right? You have institution A, you have institution B, and they both put up strong arguments, but sometimes their arguments for institution B might actually seem like it's just completely, you know, if you deliberate against us, we're going to go out of business. And it's completely not true. But to say that in a deliberation, like, I just feel like it kind of chills speech. I feel like we won't be able to be very honest and open about it.
I will defer to the lawyers, but as a non-practicing lawyer myself, I will say that I think the legislature was pretty clear in HB 1244 that all meetings be conducted in open session, including discussions and any formal action taken by us as the commission. So Ms. Cady or Ms. Ward, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, but my take is that the Open Meetings Act requires for all of our meetings to be on this topic, program approval, to be in open meetings. Ms. Cadia?
It's not actually the Open Meetings Act. It's specific to program review. The program review legislation has required that. The work group that fed the program review legislation that happened with legislators and segment heads, as well as a few others last fall, they had made that recommendation. So it's been discussed in a number of forums, and that is absolutely the legislature's intention for this particular process, that it happen in open session.
Yes, that's what I meant to say. As a result of HB 1244, which controls our meetings on program approval.
And additionally, even if the Open Meetings Act were to permit this to be in a closed session, if there is a law that is more specific that says it has to be in open, then that particular law would sort of overrule or trump the Open Meetings Act. And this particular law, which says your deliberations have to be in open, that means they have to be in open.
Does that answer your questions, Commissioner Serrano? Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Tabor and then Commissioner Howe.
Great, thank you. Well, just actually a quick reflection on what Commissioner Serrano said. I'm actually in favor of this all happening in open, having been on both sides. I think the rigor of the conversation in closed doors was worthy of folks to hear. And I think what I continued to hear was where folks felt like the data was not necessarily showing that arguments made were compelling. And so I just, looking forward to the future as these deliberations happen, I hope we'll continue to share everything we would share if it were not in the public forum, and just continue to rely on where we are seeing the data supporting arguments or where we feel like the data might be lacking. The question I was going to have is actually a little bit more, Matt. I really appreciate the invitation to submit amendments here, and wanted to do a little bit of what we call a pre-mortem at my nonprofit. So if we fast forward a year and we find ourselves like banging our heads against the wall that we're in situations we don't want to be in, what do we think are the things that we haven't yet, the loopholes we haven't closed? Where do we think there are opportunities to be tighter? I had the experience of going through just 2 of these program review meetings, and I see most of the things I'd be most worried about are addressed in the regulation. But for folks who have more context, are there any things a year from now that we think we will want to be back here addressing now?
I think it's a good question. I think there are only 2 commissioners who've been on the commission longer than you, Commissioner Tabor Stalen. So I'm not sure we can anticipate. But Ms. Cady or Ms. Ward, Dr. Dow, and anything you can think of that you wish that you'd had time to go a little further on, or you want us to explore more, because I think it's a very good point.
I will defer to Secretary Rye for comment. I am comfortable with these. I do feel like they hit the mark on elements that have been problematic, challenging, don't really get, as commissioners, the information that you need. We certainly discussed a number of alternatives and internally to make this work for you all as commissioners, to get the information that you need to make the decision that is before you. So I feel comfortable with these. I will defer to Secretary Rye.
Exactly. I feel comfortable as well. This is all about clarity and transparency. So this bill is about transparency. And this is not just in isolation, this part. I think Commissioner Agu raised a question about data, which data to believe. So there are other regulations. They will say, okay, this is how data will be presented, and we will not argue about, data coming from this source or data coming from this source. We'll have, okay, data coming from these sources with a note from Department of Labor or something you will see in that regard. The other is that we have this advisory council that you just approved in the previous reg. They will look at the process and they will bring recommendations if changes are needed. And if you all feel some changes are needed, that can also go to the same council and then come back to you for changes. So nothing is completely written in stone. I believe we will have some flexibility in tweaking these as we move forward.
Thank you. Commissioner Howe and then Commissioner Agu.
All right, just to be sort of pedantic here, I think that it's imperative that as we go through this process and when we're in public session discussing it, we have to remember the length of time that it has taken for us to get to the review process and to be respectful at all times with what we say, so that I'm not suggesting thee, thou, and thou as formal things to say, but no slang should be used. No comment like this is ridiculous. I mean, just address it as you would. For example, if you were in court before me, with all respect to the whole process and all the people who have worked so hard to get us to the point where we're having a discussion and a vote, I think it's absolutely imperative. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Howe. I completely agree. Commissioner Agu?
Yeah, going back to Commissioner Tabor's question, I think what might cause this to fail, and when I say fail, I mean where we are in a place a year from now where we have a lot of institutions mad who believe they were not treated fairly or not treated transparently. To me, that's basically the decision, the situation that I walked into, we all walked into about a year ago, where that was the feeling. To me, that's what we would consider, I think, not failure. I think it's two things, and I actually don't think they're procedural. I think it's there's going to be a fair amount of, I think, training on what this new process is going to be like, and not just training is the wrong word, recalibration of expectations of institutions. So for example, on the data piece, what I saw in my process was institutions brought data that bolstered their case. You have, in this new process, you are going to remove that. You are going to say, no, this is the data, and if the data doesn't say what you like, there's nothing to do about that. This is the data. That is going to be a recalibration of expectations for a lot of institutions. The second one is that redefinition of harm. That is a very different definition now. We have gone from harm to institutions, from harm to students and the state. And how I'm going to be careful with my wording. Many institutions believe those two things are the same thing. They're not. And so that's going to be a recalibration of expectations that I think is actually going to be an MHEC to do. And to be honest, I think we're going to have a couple of meetings where it's going to be a little rough because this is going to be new for folks. So Commissioner Tabor, to your question, I actually think procedurally, I'll be frank, I think they've done everything that they can do in this document. I think the issue is going to be that recalibration of expectation of institutions to do that. And I do think that there's a role for MHEC to play here. I think there's going to be some training required. So at least when a decision comes out the way that they don't want it to, they say, well, they did tell us this is the way that they're going to do it going forward. And I think that might be a thing that we can kind of get in front of. But it's still going to be rough the first time or few, just because those two, the data thing and the harm definition, those are big changes, which I think I agree with, but it's going to be rocky the first time. And I just don't know if there's a way around that beyond some of the great training that I hope that Dr. Dow and you and your team are able to do with institutions. So that's just my take on your question, Commissioner.
Excellent point. And I agree with all that's been said. Particularly, I welcome the transparency. I want the public to see how seriously this commission takes this process, how we are focused first and foremost on the impact on students and student success, and how we are trying to be data focused in making those decisions. following the legal rubric that has been set up by the legislature. So I think the transparency is excellent, and I think that it will help us improve the process. Dr. Dukes.
You know, I really appreciate Commissioner Agu's comments with regard to harm. And I think that, you know, we institution, student, state, and then it will always depend on which level of harm takes precedence, given what it is that institutions are asking for or what institutions are against. So I really appreciate that. And I think it is something we're going to have to move through, because I really struggled with that in the cases that we had before us. It's like, who are we really harming here? And so I do appreciate your comments, and I'm 100% in agreement with those, Commissioner Agu.
Commissioner Serrano.
Yeah, so just a couple questions. So one is on the data. So like, again, as Commissioner Agu mentioned about, like, one institution will say, according to this bureau of this is, it'll hurt us this way. The other institution will say something else. Who chooses what we should go by? Because I think that's been something that comes up, and like, you know, I feel like a lot of times we're asked to be like labor economists, and we're not. So that's one thing.
I am.
And on the there you go, Commissioner Burnham. There you go.
Dr. Burnham actually is a labor economist.
There you go. And then the other one is on the issue of appealing. So if we render a decision, and how many appeals does institutions get, or can they appeal? And again, this is where I get into that open discussion, because I feel like if we're gonna be having open discussion and we deliberate on certain things, if they're gonna be using pieces of our arguments there to kind of bolster their appeals, how long does this go?
Sure. Ms. Katie, do you want to address those questions?
Just the appeal question. So the decision of the commission would be final, or if you're not able to reach decision, the secretary, there's no further appeals permitted in this process.
And then Dr. Dow, would you like to tackle Commissioner Serrano's first question?
Absolutely. So per House Bill 1244, we are expected to coordinate and collaborate with, at minimum, Department of Labor and Department of Commerce to develop a statewide and regional analysis of workforce need. We are expected to have that produced no later than January 1st, 2025, with an expectation that we update it annually. It will be an addendum to the state plan. So it will be a public-facing standing document. We've had 2 or 3 initial conversations with Department of Labor and Department of Commerce to move this work forward. There are some existing lists, existing analyses that they use to identify emerging areas, high demand workforce needs. And so those will be good starting points for those lists that will be the addendum to the state plan. So that is where we will have kind of a universal truth of what kind of workforce need we have in Maryland, both in terms of we need more people in a particular field, as well as these are emerging fields or fields of interest that we need to expand upon.
And to be clear, Dr. Dow, that is not being addressed in this set of regulations that we're being asked to vote on today. These are just the process for the meeting so that we can start acting more transparently and following the will of the legislature. We want it to stand up our new processes, and then we will dive into those substantive regulations. Okay.
Correct.
Other questions, comments, proposed amendments?
And to clarify, Chair Motz, what the commissioners will see in terms of that statewide analysis is a draft of the appendix that will go to the state plan. That is forthcoming, and that is what you will see likely in the September and October meetings. We are obligated to share that with all the colleges and universities for them to weigh in. So again, right now it's being envisioned, we need more welders, we need more of people that do these things. These are emerging industries as well. And we'll circulate that out for public comment and feedback. It'll come back to the commission for final review, and then that will be considered version 1, the 2025 statewide analysis of workforce need, statewide and regional, right? Statewide and regional.
Okay. Commissioner Serrano?
One last point. So, like, I don't want to go back into one of the cases, but I think, I mean, there was kind of the nuance of between business administration, business analytics. If the Department of Labor or the Department of Commerce has a certain definition and it's kind of split at the institutional level, where our focus would not be on business administration as defined by the Department of Labor, as defined on business analytics, there still kind of falls within this commission to kind of really kind of go into the space of labor economics, right? Like to look at what the future is. Is that reflected in these guidelines?
So that will likely be reflected in the analyses that staff conduct in preparation for a secretary's decision.
Commissioner Arnold?
And yes, and I was just going to say, this advisory council is going to help us come up with this addendum. Is not just going to be like static. We can go back and say, look, we have this case in front of us. For this, can if there's some part of the demand projection that is unclear, let's get that clarity. But the goal is that we keep going back to that single source of truth. And what we don't want, and this is what I'm hearing from you, Dr. Dow, so an institution is not going to come in with their own data to say, no, it says this. If there's any lack of clarification, we're going to go back to this council, really our Department of Labor and Commerce, to clarify that.
Exactly.
What we have now is this kind of data auction, where we kind of say, which data do you believe more? And that's a losing game. Dr. Serrano, you've lived that. I don't want to live it again. And so I think in the end, we go back to this council over and over again to get that clarification on demand. And we say, in the end, I'm sorry if this may not comport with what you see going forward, but that's what we're going to go with. Right. And again, tell me if I'm wrong there, Dr. Dow.
No, that's absolutely right, which is why even more important, why we need to make sure the campuses see a draft of this list before you finally adopt it, or every time you adopt it. That way they can weigh in. They can say, listen, we really think that this occupation or this field needs to be on the list. And then we can take it back to our sister agencies, labor and commerce in particular, but that's where we can also engage with licensing boards. We can engage with other national organizations to say, do we really include this profession or this job on the list? So that you're absolutely right. We have that before we're entertaining a proposal. The proposal uses that list as the evidence. The one correction or clarification that I would provide is it's not necessarily a formal council, this work between labor and commerce and other organizations. It is an ongoing discussion, and we have a commitment from all of our organizations to do this collaboratively with the right community partners at the table when appropriate. However, there is an advisory council on workforce need, and I may be reversing the words there a little bit. I think it's maybe Workforce Need Advisory Council. Nonetheless, there is an advisory council that we are starting to convene that is specific to a scholarship, and it's the Workforce Scholarship Grant. We can use those discussions as well to help inform this state plan addendum on workforce need. The value add of that advisory council is, like the other, it's set in statute. It has very specific membership and includes business and industry partners by law. So again, we've already sent out invites to convene that group, to identify nominate folks. And so my hope is that we convene that group in the next, we said August 15th, I think realistically before the end of the summer, before Labor Day. But that will be a council in which we can very broadly talk about statewide workforce need.
Thanks, Dr.
So sorry, a little sidetrack there, but some additional information that I can.
Apologies for conflating that. That was my fault.
Commissioner Alide and then Dr. Rai.
If we go to page 32, something that caught my eye was a question that I had, especially in number 2. It says no less than 3 weeks prior to the scheduled meeting, the president of the proposing institution in the presence of any objecting institution shall submit to the commission in care of the secretary with copies of all involved institutions, all the details of what they're going to say. Would it be okay to like give them like a standard of like, if you're going to say these statistics, we'd like to see them prior to the time? So I think going back to what Commissioner Serrano says, if they start saying, oh, it's from this bureau or this bureau or this bureau, we might not have, I don't know how long we have, but we might not have the time to fact check everything. So I think it would be helpful if, like, for me, I'm a researcher, I love researching, to like research it. And then so we can come, have like good conversation.
Chair Motz, I'm happy to take that question.
Yes, please do.
So you'll see, great point. Later in that paragraph, you see that the memorandum may reference any of the materials transmitted by the secretary under subsection 1 of this section and may not include any additional materials. So what happens before it even gets to a review meeting is the secretary and MHEC staff, we meet with the campuses, we collect a ton of other information, we review that information, compile it. And so in many ways, that process will start to vet any data that is concerning or doesn't have validity to it or hasn't, in the big sense, been reviewed by Department of Labor and Department of Commerce for the purposes of the state plan addendum. So there is an expectation that by the time this information gets to the commission, we will, as staff, have reviewed it and vetted it for your consumption.
Thank you.
Ms. Kadia, anything to add?
I just wanted to point out that all of those materials will be transmitted to you earlier with this process. If you go up to subsection 1 on that page, all of those materials that Dr. Dow just described are to be sent to the commissioners within 10 business days of review. And that was very specific to the commissioner's ability to process and look at all of the materials that are involved.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? So just procedurally, if we bring this, and I should say for the record, Commissioner Howe mentioned this earlier with respect to the bylaws. These amendments were prepared by Assistant Attorney General Kadia and have been approved for legality and legal sufficiency by the Maryland Office of the Attorney General. If we vote on these, the next step, and we approve them, the next step would be these amendments are submitted to the legislature's AELR committee, and that stands for the Joint Committee on Administrative, Executive, and Legislative Review. And then they're submitted for publication in the Maryland Register to the Division of State Documents. At that point, there will be a public comment period, and then the regulations would come back to the commission for our final approval. So this is sort of the first step in the state's standard regulatory process. So with that background, is there a motion to approve for publication in the Maryland Register the proposed regulatory amendments for commission review of academic program proposal decisions? Do we have a motion for that?
I so move, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Burnham. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Howe. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? All right. And then second motion, do we have a motion to authorize MHEC's Assistant Attorney General to make any non-substantive edits to the proposed regulations just to conform to the stylistic and formatting requirements of the AELR committee and the Division of State Documents?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? All right. Thank you all again for your attention to these really important regulations. Dr. Dow, I believe that concludes your set. Your
one more.
Yes. Oh, yes. How could I have forgotten? This is the other set of regulations, which is just a preview. We're not being asked to vote on today. And this is the regulations related to the regulatory standard for the definition of substantial modification. Dr. Dow has been working with a group of stakeholders across the segments of higher education. They've met several times already, starting in March, and she wanted to bring this to our attention. So to give us a sense of what they're working on and an opportunity to weigh in. So Dr. Dow, I will turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Again, just as Chair Motz alluded, this is just for informational purposes only for today's meeting. You will see a formal set of regulatory changes in an upcoming meeting. We're trying to shoot for August, but it might be September. We are charged again through House Bill 1244 to review the definition of a substantial modification to an existing program. So it's one thing for an institution to implement or to request a brand new program. It's another thing for an institution to make a substantial modification to an existing program. You'll see in the memo the current definition, regulatory definition for what constitutes a substantial modification. It is a change to more than 33% of an existing program's coursework, offering an existing program at an offsite campus, establishing a new area of concentration, or establishing a new program title within an approved program. We have struggled with the definition of substantial modification for a number of years. Quite honestly, we convened a group right before the pandemic hit, and so this has been something that has been on the agency's agenda for a number of years to revise and make appropriate changes. So what you see here is a reflection of conversations that we have had with segmental representatives, so community colleges, public 4-years, Morgan St. Mary's, and our private institutions. There seems to be quite a bit of consensus that we increase the threshold from 33% to 51% in changing an institution, a particular program's coursework. This is an important element, particularly for our community colleges when they have really a 12-credit certificate. If we keep it at the 33%, they change one course and they hit that 33%. And so we've had lots of discussion about the value out of increasing the percentage to 50%. Another important element in these drafted regulations is we've deleted quite a bit of information that is required in the proposal for a substantial modification. Under current procedures, an institution seeking to substantially modify an existing program essentially has to submit all the same information for a new proposal. And we all fundamentally agree that is unnecessary, that's too much, we don't need that information. So the elements of what they submit will actually live in a policy document because each substantial modification will likely be a bit nuanced, and to corner into a regulatory standard might be a bit more challenging than making it easier. So those are kind of some of the big changes that the work group has been discussing. The work group meets again on July 31st, next week. We'll continue to review these changes, but wanted to give you all a preview in the meantime and give you an update of what these changes might look like forthcoming. And I'm happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Dr. Dow. Any questions or comments from the commission? All right, I guess your report and it was very thorough.
Wonderful. I will say, as it says in the memo, again, we've convened this work group of representatives. They are working with their constituents to do kind of octopus coordination. But if there are any comments from the general public, from you all, feel free to send them to me via email in advance of the August commission meeting, and we can incorporate that moving forward.
I see we do have a couple of questions. We'll start with Commissioner Howe and then Commissioner Serrano.
And my statement is not really a question. It is to compliment Dr. Dow and the entire staff and Dr. Rye for all the huge amount of work that has gone into this. It's time now. I'm hoping that you can get some sleep.
Thank you. And
Thank
if
you.
we may just also give a shout out to our Director for Academic Affairs, Trish Gordon McCown, and our Associate Director for Program Review, Lindsay Silva. They really have led the charge in convening and making sure all stakeholders have an opportunity to weigh in. Thank you, Commissioner Howe.
Commissioner Serrano, and then Dr. Rye.
Yeah, my question is, like, I'm trying to think of the case that we had where it was courses that were changed, but it just seemed like it was like the title that was changed. It was something like very superficial, or not, or they weren't changed, or I don't know. They were trying to keep the same, but like, I guess when we talk about program change, like 30%, 50%, change of what? Is it the titles? Is it is it the actual coursework, the actual subject matter? Like, how do we weigh that?
Absolutely. So right now we have it drafted as specifically coursework. So what we end up doing in an administrative pragmatically way is we look at courses coming in and courses going out. That again, doing the math on that, what we count where to hit a particular percentage, we're going to put in a policy document. But to answer your question, it is 51% of the coursework. The group has talked a bit about title changes as well as zip code changes as potential thresholds for meeting a substantial modification. There hasn't been a full consensus on that, so that's not part of this draft, but the work group has been talking about those nuances. There is also an element where an institution needs to change their program to meet industry standards. We want them to do that. That's a good thing. And so trying to be both supportive of making those changes for industry purposes, but also making sure we have an opportunity to review duplication. That has been the centerfold of thinking about why we even care about substantial modifications. It gives us the opportunity to say, are you getting now too close to another program through this substantial modification? So we're trying to be super thoughtful about, we have enough of a safety net in these rules to be able to reevaluate duplication when appropriate. I'll say one more thing, that the work group has also talked about changes that are motivated by an accreditor or a licensing board. So a licensing board comes along and says, we really want you to include this new element in your program. That is being motivated by an external entity, again, for the purposes of industry standards. So we're trying to think through how to accommodate that, to say that's not something we need to review. We should be notified of it, but it shouldn't go through this full review process. So more to come, but those are some additional elements we're talking through.
Thanks, Dr. Dow. Dr. Rye, and then Commissioner Burnham.
Yeah, I also want to thank Academic Affairs team led by Dr. Dow and her team members, and also our assistant AG, Soma Kedia, our General Counsel, Kimberly Ward. They have been very, very busy with this work. My comment on modification is that it's something very important. Our CEO of Intel a few years ago said that the products that they ship to their customers in December of a certain year, in January of the same years, they didn't know that those products existed. The point is that digitization of economy and advances in technology are happening so fast, and higher education is lagging behind. I will worry if we are not getting modification requests from institutions. We want them, we want more. And if industry has changed, and if we are not changing our computer science program, that's a worry, right? Because then our graduates are not ready to work. So anything we can do to simplify the process, I think that would be very helpful.
Good point. Dr. Burnham?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question regarding the section dealing with off-campus programs. As I read it, it seems to limit new programs off campus to the regional higher education centers. If I read that correctly, I'm just curious about the rationale, and is that really intended to mean that there will be no programs off campus within the state except those in the higher ed centers?
I appreciate your comment, but that is not what the regulations at least intend to say, and I believe they don't say. So what the regulations are saying is if an institution is seeking to offer the program off campus, by definition of what off campus is, they do need to submit a substantial modification. We do consider that a substantial modification. What the other element that section is saying is, years ago, it used to be if an institution wanted to offer a new program at a regional higher ed center, they needed to offer that program at their home campus. We realized that was not taking advantage of our RHECs in the way that the RHECs are intended. So we changed the rule to say, if you're offering at a regional higher ed center, you do not have to offer it at your home campus. You can seek to implement completely at the regional higher ed center appropriately. So we still look at to make sure that there's going to be administrative capacity, advising, those resources are provided at the RHEC. But that is that's the distinction of
okay,
what,
that clarifies it. Thank you.
Yeah, so certainly not a prohibition or a breaking of off-campus sites. It's just a clarification that is still a substantial modification. And the major deletion is to say we don't need all of this information. We need different kinds of information.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for the clarification, Dr. Dow. If you wouldn't mind reviewing how that's written, because I think if Commissioner Burnham read it that way, it may be not clear to others as well. Just make sure it's crystal clear what we're saying.
Absolutely.
Other questions or comments? All right. So at this point, this was just informational. There's no action requested of us, Dr. Dow. Is that right?
Correct. And so comments like Commissioner Burnham on clarification, very helpful. We will evaluate and revise accordingly. And this is just an opportunity for you all to get a preview. So thank you, Chair Motz and commissioners.
Okay. I just want to echo what others have said. This has clearly been an extraordinary amount of work for you, Dr. Dow, and your team, as well as for our Assistant Attorneys General, Ward and Kadia. So thank you for keeping things moving. Clearly, this has not been a slow summer at MHEC, and you are continuing to get the work done, and we appreciate all that you've done.
Thank you.
Now I think this does conclude your part of the agenda. Am I right, Dr. Dow? And we will turn it over to the Department of Finance and Administration, Mr. Jeff Newman, and then specifically the Office of Student Financial Assistance, Mr. Al Dorset.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Mr. Secretary. I'm actually just going to turn this right over to Al for the first item. This is Al and Soma Kedia for COMAR regulations pertaining to the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarships. So Al?
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Good morning, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners, Mr. Secretary. I'll be reading the memorandum on page 5 and 6 of the commission book, which goes over the proposed regulations for COMAR 13B 0821 Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship, which is found on 7 and 16, or 7 through 16. Just to give a brief overview, not to read the whole thing, but in 2018, the legislature created the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship Program, Chapter 554 of the Acts of 2018, to provide last dollar need-based financial assistance to students attending community college in the state. In 2023, the legislative legislature made a significant change by decentralizing the program, Chapter 34 of the Acts of 2023, HB 923. Instead of making scholarship awards directly to students starting in FY25, the Commission's Office of Student Financial Assistance will be responsible for allocating appropriated funds to the state's 16 community colleges who would make the awards to students. All of these legislative amendments necessitate regulatory amendments. However, because of the extent of the changes of the program over the last 6 years, the enclosed proposed regulations would fully replace the existing regulations, which would be repealed. The new regulations delineate division of responsibilities between the Commission and the community colleges in administration of the scholarship, clarify student eligibility requirements, including the types of programs or courses in which students may be enrolled, differentiate between eligibility requirements for students in credit-bearing programs and courses and students in non-credit programs and registered apprenticeships. As required by statute, set forth income eligibility verification procedures for community colleges, set forth procedures for the Commission to annually allocate funds to each community college and include reporting, reconciliation, and audit requirements. The enclosed proposed regulations were prepared by Selma Kadia, Assistant Attorney General, and thus have been approved for legality by the Assistant Attorney General as required by the Maryland Administrative Procedure Act. Upon your approval, proposed regulations and regulatory amendments are submitted to the Legislature's Joint Committee, Administrative Executive Legislative Review. Recommendations. It is recommended that the Commission, 1, approve the publication in the Maryland Register, the proposed repeal of the current regulations and then proposed new regulations for the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship Program. 2, authorizes its Assistant Attorney General to make non-substantive edits to the proposed regulations to conform to the stylistic and formatting requirements of AELR and DSD. And 3, approve use of the attached proposed regulations to serve as official program guidelines pending the promulgation of the proposed repeal of the current regulations and adopt of the new regulations for the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship Program.
All right, thanks, Mr. Dorset. The legislature passed a law establishing the Promise Scholarship 6 years ago. They've been tweaking the law pretty much every year since during the legislative session. This is kind of an overhaul, like an omnibus overhaul of the regulations to bring them up to date with these changes to the law over the past 6 years. Is that correct?
Correct.
So the regulations very much mirror what the current law is.
Correct.
Not a lot of discretion. Any questions, comments, concerns from the commission?
Just
Commissioner Lide.
When I read this law, when I read it, I was very excited, and I'm glad that it was passed. I think something that I really thought that was I love that they added was on page 8 when it talks about extenuating circumstances. Hopefully I said that right. And I feel like that is really important, especially disability and serious illness of students, because I feel like sometimes people have the desire to succeed, but they don't. Sometimes they can be limited in other factors. So I just thought that piece was very important to me. So I was like, thank you. You guys did a great job on this.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments? Commissioner Serrano.
Yeah, so from my understanding, I want to say PG County has a grant that kind of is a backstop to this the Promise Scholarship, and so from when these regulations when the law comes into place, is the challenge is that it's on a first come first serve basis and people are being left out, and grants like PG County, the PG County grant will kind of back up this Promise Scholarship, or I'm trying to think where are the challenges that we're seeing with this law? Where's the unmet need?
Dr. Rai, do you want to take that?
Yes, yes. So thank you. I think this law was first passed when, there was a lot of conversation about free community colleges. Tennessee started that several years ago. At that time, state started with Promises Scholarship. This was last dollar scholarship. So low-income students who are eligible, how much federal financial aid they're getting, and all financial aid, then what is the leftover amount? So this scholarship was supposed to pay the last dollar or the gap that existed. But the way it was implemented, it didn't reflect the needs of our community college students. The requirement in the beginning was that student has to be a full-time student. They have to apply by 1st March, those types of things. So over the years, including this regulation, makes it easier for community college students to access these scholarships. For example, part-time students are eligible for this scholarship now, which is a huge change and very well appreciated by folks at community colleges. As you know, community colleges has a large enrollment of what we call non-credit students. They were not eligible for this Promises Scholarship. Now they are eligible, and the process for them is also different because they don't go through the typical financial aid process that a credit student goes, and is decentralized. So we are giving independence to community colleges under certain guidelines to see where the programs are, where the students are, and they have the flexibility to award this financial aid to students on the credit side and also on the non-credit side. $15 million over the years. Because of these strict guidelines, about half of the funds were returned and they were not used. So we are hoping that with these changes, community colleges will be able to utilize these scholarships to serve their students.
Commissioner Lade?
I have a question on page 9. And then that's number 6, number 6 for publication, publicizing the scholarship. Because Commissioner Ray was talking about how half of them were not used, could that also have to do with like publication? And how do we intend to make sure that everyone is able to know about this? It's like, other than the sorry, they're talking. But other than the websites, what are other resources that we're using? Have we considered social media as a tool? Do we have people or young students or students SGAs talking about it? Thank you.
So, Dr. Rai, do you want to talk about, it's an excellent question from Commissioner Lade, and it's been an ongoing topic of conversation in terms of outreach. I think the agency has hired a new outreach person under Mr. Derek Coley. Dr. Rai, do you want to talk more about the agency's outreach efforts about this scholarship?
Yes. So certainly increased outreach efforts, social media and other platforms. But this scholarship, we are working very closely with financial aid counselors at our community colleges. They are aware of the students who are on their campuses and who could benefit from this scholarship. So 2 ways. First, working with community college financial aid counselors, social media and other outreach as well. Is Derek Coley on call? Derek, can you give us a little bit more details on our general efforts on social media?
Yes, sir. Dr. Rai, thank you, and good morning, everyone. We are ramping up. We did a release when the new legislation was passed by Delegate Kevin Harris regarding the non-credit students who were eligible for this scholarship. But more importantly, one of the things we want to do going forward is each month we're going to highlight the scholarships as they open. This has been something that we have begun targeting. Currently, we have the state tax credit being promoted through our social media platforms and on our website as well. And we will continue to push through all media channels those opportunities as they become available here at the agency.
Dr. Dukes.
If I could just add to that, I do know that this information goes out too in various ways to nonprofit organizations that are serving these students in some kind of way, through social services, certainly through churches. So even the institutions themselves have a way of publicizing this material. And we have a number of organizations, both social organizations, nonprofit, not-for-profit. You know, there are some defining ways with regard to those two terminologies, but the institutions themselves are following up and not only retweeting what the department is doing, but they also, through their own communications offices, are taking advantage of everything that's possible for them in their communities to get this information out. So I think that the changes are very much welcomed. Having been a college president when this Promise Scholarship was established, and that we have come a long way in ensuring financial access to our community colleges, and with other financial aid programs to our four-year private and public institutions.
Commissioner Dukes, thank you for that. And Chair Mott, if I may add one more thing.
Yeah.
We are doing a complete retooling as it relates to our marketing communication strategy here at the agency. The Promise Scholarship, as you all know, is a powerful tool with respect to educational equity and providing that initial ladder rung for those individuals who are socially, economically challenged. However, there are a lot of career scholarships that we are offering here at the agency as well that also provide an opportunity. And so, Commissioner Dukes, your point with respect to leveraging the partnerships of nonprofits, we are doing a complete retooling as well to look at spreading that message with respect to all of our tools in our toolbox here at the agency across the state to make sure students and families are better informed.
Thank you, Mr. Coley. And just to add to what Dr. Duke said, I think one of the reasons, to answer your question, Dr. Alide, one of the reasons, not doctor yet, Commissioner Alide, one of the reasons that the legislature decided to decentralize this scholarship was to try to get the money to the community colleges, on the theory that the community colleges are where the students are, and it's easier to have the community colleges push the money out as opposed to MHEC as a state agency. So I agree with Dr. Dukes. I think these tweaks over the years to make more students eligible, you don't have to be full-time anymore. Like, I think we're getting closer to reaching students where they are, and to your point, making sure that students know about it, because the community colleges themselves have the money to distribute. Commissioner Thompson and then Commissioner Serrano.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the information. And Mr. Coley, I was wondering about the wait list procedure and process. How does that work? How does a student get on the wait list? How do you go back to the wait list to offer the award to a student?
That would actually be under the purview of Mr. Dorsett. Al, are you still on the call as well?
Yes, I am. So
Okay.
with this new process, there is no wait list for the community college Promise Scholarship. Literally, each institution will receive an allocated amount of funds based off legislative guidelines on the percentage of Pell students at each institution. So institutions will receive basically a pre-eligibility list that they can utilize from us that will identify students that we received their FAFSA, but institutions will be able to add students on that roster, just making sure that MHEC has the students' FAFSA as well. For non-credit students that don't require a FAFSA, the institution will have its own application, or we have set up an application if they do not have the ability to have their own that they can utilize as well. But then they would just add those non-credit students to the roster as well, identifying that they paid those individuals. So there is no wait list. It's more so if those institutions run out of funds, then they would have their own wait list for a student. But we've also set up a process in which institutions that are running out of funds, as well as institutions that are not utilizing all their funds, will be able to identify themselves in either request funds or transfer funds around November, December, so that students that they may have that they don't have enough money for, they can hopefully have some funds transferred over to them to award those students as well.
Commissioner, did I answer your question, Commissioner Thompson? Okay. Commissioner,
I was reading, no, I think it's item 5 on page 9, where it talks about the wait list. So,
Yes, if I could, Chair Motz, is it okay if I?
yes.
So the statutes that the legislature passed still actually require a wait list. So it will be up to the community colleges as to how it will be implemented. But the way that Mr. Dorsett has designed the program, theoretically, it should be either not necessary or a very small amount of students.
okay. But that statement is still there.
Yes.
Right. So if the community college exhausted all funding, then they would be required to have a wait list for students. And that's where I was saying that we implemented where, let's say, a community college received less funding than another one, and they exhausted their funding. So they created a wait list. And then they requested additional funding, and another community college said, we want to transfer or reduce our funding because we're not going to spend it all. So then with that transfer, we could transfer additional funds over to the community college that requested additional funding, and then they would use their wait list to award additional students.
That helps. Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Serrano?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. One for undocumented students or DACA or DACA recipients, like, are they eligible for this scholarship under this? And then if so, and then I guess kind of tied to the second question is, can institutions allocate or prioritize certain industries? So to say we want to have early childhood education instructors, and that's what we're trying to focus on. So if students are going in for welding or something else, we're not going to really put them on the scholarship. We're going to use our funds to try to get more educators. Can they do that? And then I guess
so from my understanding, no, they can't do that. There's a priority to full-time students before they look at part-time students. But other than that, that is the only priority. As far as undocumented students completing the MISFA or now MHEC 1 app will be the same as the FAFSA. So they will still have to meet those requirements for in-state tuition eligibility. Or in county tuition eligibility, understanding that there are some guidelines that allow if they do not meet that. But if they are eligible, they will be eligible for the funds.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? All right. Well, again, these have been approved for legal sufficiency by the Maryland Office of the Attorney General, Assistant Attorney General Soma Kadia, and we are being asked to do 3 things. The first is to approve for publication in the Maryland Register the repeal of the current regulations on this topic, and to approve the new regulations for the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship. Do I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? A second. Is there a motion to authorize the Assistant Attorney General to make non-substantive edits to the proposed regulations to conform to the stylistic and formatting requirements of the AELR Committee and the Division of State Documents?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Dr. Dukes, you have a question?
No, I don't, but I would like a moment of a point for personal privilege, having been associated with the introduction of the Promise program for community colleges. I cannot tell you how happy I am to see these changes in the regulations. I don't think any of us really understand the kind of change and transformation that can occur in a student's life, the life of his or her, their families, and their communities, when they don't have to worry so much about how they make all ends meet. community college students deal with life in so many ways that are both different and identical to the students who attend our four-year partners. And when you look at a student who gets on a bus and 4 hours later, they arrive at their community college to take a course because they have to make so many transfers. They have to stop at daycare. They may have to do some things in terms of their work schedules. I get emotional myself when I think about the numbers of students who will be served by this and will not have to jump through the hoops and the barriers that we unintentionally put in front of them. So I want to thank I want to thank the secretary, his team. I want to thank the commission for this. And more importantly, I want to thank the public and the legislative for understanding what we can do in the state of Maryland as we talk about leaving no one behind. So thank you for what you've done today. Thank you, Dr. Rye, Dr. Dowd, Mr. Dorsett, Mr. Newman, for all that you've done to make this happen.
Yay.
Well said, Dr. Dukes. Thank you. Just as a point of order, I think we need to vote on one more item related to this, which is, do we have a motion to approve the use of the regulations at issue to serve as the official program guidelines pending the promulgation of the proposed repeal of the current regulations and adoption of the new regulations for the Community College Promise Scholarship Program?
So move.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? All right. Thank you, Team MHEC. Commissioner Serrano, question, comment?
Just a quick question, like in terms of funding, like what does it look? I know right now we're kind of in a phase where things are being cut left and right here, but like how confident are we about this Promise Scholarship for the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years?
We're confident. We've been receiving about $15 million per year as the appropriation. Unfortunately, prior to all these changes in the program, we were only expending $7 to $9 million per year. So, which is one of the reasons that motivated changes to the program to decentralize it and try to get it out to more students. So about $15 million a year, and that has not changed.
Because it was cut back during COVID, right?
No.
No. Okay.
All right. Mr. Dorsett, we've got 3 other items on your docket. The next is an update on the fiscal year 25, which we just began, the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, and the EEA for our newest commissioner who may not be familiar with the MHEC alphabet soup, the Educational Excellence Awards, which is the state aid that's administered by the Higher Education Commission. So Mr. Dorsett, if you could give us an update on both the federal aid and the state aid and how things have been working out since we last met in June.
If I could kick this off briefly for a second.
Sure.
Then I'll hand it over to Al. We've tried to cover pretty extensively at the last meeting and pretty much several meetings now, the issues related to the FAFSA this year and the complications that occurred with trying to get awards out. But we're happy to say that we've increased the pace and awarded over 14,000 students over 113 million for fiscal 25. We continue to focus on on the promise of awarding all eligible applicants in the Guaranteed Access Grant who completed the FAFSA by May 15th, 2024. We are still experiencing some issues with the FAFSA, including not receiving all processed FAFSAs from the U.S. Department of Education, but we're working regularly and continually with the Department of Education to make sure we get that resolved. At this time, our main focus is awarding students and requesting additional funding from what we call the Need-Based Student Financial Assistance Fund, which is leftover funding from prior years that we can use to award in the current year so that we can award as many students as possible. So that's just a brief update, and I'll hand it over to Al for a little more detail.
Thank you, Jeff. I was going to pass it over to you, but you beat me to it. So thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so just to give an overview, kind of what Mr. Newman had already indicated, so far we've received over 162,432 ICERs, which are institutional student information records. Of that total amount, 162,429 have been from Maryland residents. That's a little bit under 12,000 from what we received last year. Last year at this time, we received 174,294 ICERs, and for Maryland residents, we received 174,208. So in both areas, it's a little bit under 12,000 FAFSAs compared to last year. But again, the Department of Ed still is processing student records, especially records for individuals that could not sign their FAFSA electronically. It was a big difference last year compared to this year, because before students could do a signature page or the parent could do a signature page and the FAFSA would be processed. Now it's full paper FAFSA because there is no signature page, so they are still taking time to process paper FAFSA. As of July 23rd, 2024, as Mr. Newman said, we have awarded over 14,000 students for a total over $113 million. These are students that have accepted and not accepted, as well as some individuals that have canceled or declined their awards. In regards to students who have accepted and not accepted, we have 14,317 students for 113,043, or $113,043,400. And when it comes to students that have canceled declined, so far we've had 1,685 students for a total of $25,160,200. So you can see we've awarded way over the 114, but as we get students who cancel or decline and money becomes available, then we continue to do awarding. So at this point in time, we're still awarding on a weekly basis, but we're staying within budget until we get through our request for additional funds from the Need-Based Student Financial Aid Assistance Fund, as Mr. Newman said, and then we'll look at how many more additional students we can award. Right now, we are purely focusing on GA renewal and initial students, as well as EA renewal students if we have funding available going on May 15th date. So in total, when you're looking at it, what we awarded this week so far, we awarded 315 students for a total sum of $5,128, or $5,128,600. So ultimately, after that, we have a total of 15,000 or over 15,000 students who have been awarded, for a total of $1,214,900. And I'll end it there if you have any questions.
Any questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Williams.
Yep. Thank you so much for the report, and thanks for all the great hard work in a year of turbulence and challenge for students. I wonder if you could just remind us a little bit about the student consumer experience with understanding their awards, receiving them, accepting them, and how they walk through the process, from a student experience, and how that might change over time with the new information technology platforms that you're considering.
Sure. So currently the process is once a student is awarded, they receive a notification. It's a detailed notification, includes information about the tax credit, but talks to them about accepting their award, making sure they identify their housing status, because the FAFSA did take that away. So one of the requirements we had on there was not only the student update their enrollment, but also update their housing status, and identifying to them that they've been awarded the maximum award. And once they make changes, if they do change their housing status, the award may adjust down to reflect the actual need-based amount. So we've tried to make it very detailed there, as well as provided contact information for them to call us or email. And that does go into our next overview when we talk about the RFP with the new system that we're looking at. With the new system, what we're hoping for is that not only does the student receive communication from us, but the student can have an open portal kind of back and forth with us. So a student can actually look at their award letter. If they have a question, they can type up their question right there, and an individual will be able to see it and actually respond to their question through the portal. So it's almost like a back and forth between the two. Even if there is a lag, like let's say the council or individual can't respond within that hour, still we'll make sure that they get to it within that day period, because there'll be a report we can run in which they'll be able to respond to all those individuals. So we've also looked at some items such as IM between the two, where a student can IM and somebody can respond directly back to them. But definitely we're looking at this constant communication where the student can see any comments, or they can respond to comments, and we can see theirs as well.
Thank you. That's really helpful, understanding that it's a complex environment for people to navigate, particularly, incoming freshmen in college, and knowing that you have a roadmap to a new service and product that will improve the consumer and student experience for real-time communication and problem solving is really heartening. And I'm excited to hear that that's part of your planning for, hopefully delivery next year.
Dr. Rai?
Yeah, Commissioner Williams, thank you for that question. We see a lot of opportunities for improvement in that area. Mr. Dorsett and his team has done the best possible, given the challenges that came from federal side, but also the challenges that we have with our own technology. First of all, it limits the students from which technology you can complete your form. That's not acceptable. Second, there are architectural issues. All the calculations are done within the database. So that makes the system very slow. When a lot of the students are on the system, it goes in the loop, and the students are not able to access the system. Whenever we award scholarships, we have to pretty much take the system down. So those are the challenges. There were capacity issues of the system. Thanks to our colleagues in Do It, in the middle of all this, they were able to address our request, and they did some really smart thing and increased the capacity. That helped a little bit, but not as much as we would like to. Therefore, the next step is changing this platform. We are very thankful to the state government, our legislature, for providing us resources so we can bring really state-of-the-art technology. And I believe Mr. Dorsett and Mr. Newman are going to give us an update on that process as well.
Thanks. Before we get to that, any other questions about the financial aid awards? Commissioner Serrano.
Just a quick question. For students with mixed status families, I know the FAFSA required Social Security numbers for the parents. On the Maryland form, was that required as well, or was that a challenge?
No, on the Maryland form, that wasn't required. And actually, the FAFSA did not require a number. They just had a certain way that wasn't working for them, for the IRS to identify those individuals, which that was the complication that they actually did a workaround for. So they've done that workaround now for about 2 months, or actually more than 3 months, where a lot of mixed families now are able to complete, but some are still having some issues. We've received some of those FAFSAs, but not all of them.
Okay. Mr. Dorsett, I had a question. If you wouldn't mind, please bringing up your PowerPoint presentation again. I'm particularly interested in the funds that have been awarded but have not yet been accepted or have been declined or canceled. If you could just remind the commissioners, what would be some reasons for declining or canceling? And then also for the awards that haven't yet been accepted, how much time do students have to accept before you go to the next person on the list?
So reasons for declining would be the student choosing not to go to school, the student choosing to go to a school out of state. So those would be really the main reasons why individuals are declining the awards. Either they're going out of state or they're choosing not to go to school. Remember, some of these awards, especially for the initial students, are individuals who may not have been eligible for the award last year or the year before. These may be individuals that have identified that they were going out of state or have been going out of state, but they still would have been eligible for the award with the new changes, which has it where the student up to the age of 26, as well as no more than 6 years out of high school. So that may be a reason why some students are declining, or those are mainly the reasons why students are declining. Either a student just coming out, deciding that they're going to go to school out of state, not go to school at all, or it may have been an initial student that's been in school, now eligible for the award based off new guidelines, but has continued to go to school out of state. Students usually have 6 weeks after awarded to receive the award, or to accept the award. If the award is not accepted by that time frame, then the award is canceled. If a student does usually call us within a week or 2 weeks and says they made a mistake, they wanted to actually accept the award, then usually we can reinstate the award for the student to re-accept the award. The reason why we have that 6-week period on there is because if we just left it out there, we would not be able to award any additional students that actually are ready to accept their awards now. Additionally, cancellations may be that a school runs satisfactory academic progress at the end of the semester, finds that the student is not meeting satisfactory academic progress, or for other reasons, the institution may cancel the award on the student side because they see that the student is not eligible, which is information that we do not have.
Okay, so that's helpful, thank you. I'm particularly interested in the data in the middle of your slide about the Guaranteed Access Grant new students, GA initial. So a third, this is just to remind everyone, this is a $20,000 grant for up to 4 years. This is a lot of money for our students who need the financial assistance the most. So if I'm reading your data right, you've awarded 2,196. I'm sorry, you've awarded 2,096 have accepted, but another 1,209, so almost a third of all the students who've gotten an award haven't accepted the money. Is that right, Mr. Dorsett?
Right. Now, remember, as I run these reports, these are individuals that we're awarding last week or the week before. So that's why it could be so many. They just haven't done that yet. We usually do about 4 notifications to students. So we do a new initial notification saying they need to accept their award. Then we do a second, third, and then a final notification saying that their award is going to get canceled if they don't accept by that time frame, that given time frame. So some students are just kind of maybe not getting into it yet. Maybe they're on vacation, but that's why we give them that 6-week period really to get there and accept their award.
So those 1,209 students, these are first-time recipients of this $20,000 grant who fall into the awarded not accepted. Are they still in the 6-week window where they can still accept?
Yes.
Okay. And do we have, to Commissioner Alide's comments earlier about outreach, I mean, these are students who have gone through all the work of filling out the FAFSA. They've they've gone on the MHAC website and filled out the, the MD CAPS portion as well. So these are students who've gone through a lot of work, presumably have gotten into college and are planning to go and really can't afford college without this $20,000 grant. Is there more that we could be doing? I know you mentioned the four points of outreach, but is there more that we could be doing for these students? Or I guess another way to ask it is, do you have data on how many students after the 6 weeks fail to accept it and their awards get canceled? Maybe that was your next slide.
So we have how many awards have been canceled, which shows the canceled or declined awards. So when you look at the GA initial right here, you see that out of the 1,393 students for GA initials that canceled or declined their awards, 1,291 of them were canceled. Do we have?
They didn't follow up within the 6 weeks.
That would be majority of them, but some of them may be the institutions canceling. So that's where we don't have that additional data, but we can work on getting that data.
I'm just wondering if in our efforts to be more student focused, if we could drill down on the reasons for that. And if a student decides to go out of state or decides not to go to college, that's on the student and there's nothing we can do about that. But if there's a student who forgot to check her email or just sort of missed the deadline and this is keeping them from going to college, I'm just wondering if there's a way that we could know what those drivers are and try to be more targeted in our approach.
I mean, it's definitely something for us to think about and discuss and see what opportunities are there.
Okay. And then the other question I had, and you made reference to this earlier, there are, for the renewal students, so the students who are upperclassmen, we are waiting on some of the colleges to tell us which students are actually coming back and have achieved satisfactory academic progress so that they're allowed to re-enroll and therefore are entitled to this large grant. And for the students who aren't re-enrolling or haven't met satisfactory academic progress, that frees up more money for incoming college freshmen, correct?
So that is if the school cancels them. So those students are awarded. So in some cases where you may have a renewal student that's canceled, it may be because that the individual did not meet satisfactory academic progress. The school saw the award and during their certification process, they decided to update that student's record and say, okay, this award is canceled. But, we're fortunate that the student's not eligible for the award, but at least we get the understanding that now that money can be utilized to either award an additional renewal student that comes in as eligible or an initial student. It's either or really because we have not still awarded all renewal students. There still are renewal students that are waiting for their credits to be reported for the spring semester in order to be awarded as well.
Right, exactly. And that's what I was getting at. Have we given the colleges a deadline to enter the credit so that we know whether that students are going to be going back and whether that money is spoken for?
So I can relay that over to Dr. Rye. We've put together some communication, but Dr. Rye, if you don't mind, I would defer that over to you to follow up or give more information.
Yeah, good question. We have done several general outreach through our segmental meetings and other. A communication is ready to go out from me to certain institutions where we have serious time lag with the deadline that by this deadline you must submit the credit information for students. Otherwise, the funds will be awarded to next eligible student. It should go out within 24 hours or so.
And have we set a deadline?
Yeah, Al, can you talk about, we discussed this, what should be a good deadline for that? So, we will come up with that too, and that will be mentioned in that communication. Al,
Okay.
Can you, because Al has to look at, the timing and other things.
Well, you don't have to get into details now. I just want to make sure that there is a deadline. So if students aren't going to use the money, we can give it to students who are trying to get to college, as incoming freshmen.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments from the commission? All right. Next on the agenda, Mr. Newman and Mr. Dorset, is an update on the MD-CAT's request for proposal, and that is the Maryland College Aid Processing System, the antiquated system that students currently use. You've heard reference to there being an RFP for an upgrade. It will not be ready for next financial aid season, is my understanding, but hopefully for the year after that. Is that right, Mr. Dorset, Mr. Newman?
That's correct. And we are calling the new system MD-SIS, the Maryland Student Information System. So there's MD-CATS and there's MD-SIS. And I'm pleased to say that the evaluation committee has finished its work on the technical proposals and the oral presentations from each of the potential eligible vendors. And we are moving on to look at the financial proposals to make a decision. So a decision is imminent on who the vendor will be.
Great. And then you take that to the Board of Public Works?
Yes.
Great. And the timeline is that when is the hope that that will be fully implemented? I know it won't be by a year from now, but was it 18 months from now?
Well, we're shooting for July 1st, 2025, but yeah, we're going to push to try to get it done by July 1st, 2025.
Legislative deadline is July 1st. So
Yep, we're going to push. We're going to push.
We have to get it done by July 1st. Yeah.
Great. Commissioner Agu?
Quick question, and Jeff, you answered this for me last session, and I've forgotten your answer. Is this being awarded directly by MHEC or MHEC in partnership with Do It?
MHEC in partnership with Do It. This is a major information technology project which they go through Do It.
All right, that's what I thought. I just want to be clear. No, again, to the extent that you can keep us updated. And one other question: are the firms under consideration, is that public knowledge or not?
No.
Oh, that's what I thought. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's a joint effort between Do It and MHEC. Do It has been suggesting us, guiding us, but decision will be made by MHEC. And for full disclosure, I don't know who is in the committee. I'm completely out of that process as the secretary, but I have put some requirements and expectations, but from the process, I'm also separated.
No, I'll beat a dead horse here, which is that we have seen many IT projects start with very hopeful timelines and end up very over budget and very over time. And so I know this commission will be very focused on making sure that does not happen here, because we are thinking about that a financial aid year from now, where hopefully students are in a better place, and we're also going to figure out how we manage this upcoming year, which will probably still have some bumps.
Great. All right, I can't believe it. We're on our last agenda item, which is an update on the Community College Promise Scholarship, about which we've already spoken some. So, Mr. Dorset, Mr. Newman?
Mr. Dorset?
Sure. Just an update. As I had previously mentioned, we had already given the community colleges their allocations for FY25. Blessedly, the budget did not change, so we still received the $15 million. So at this point in time, we are working on invoices to submit to our finance department so that they can process those invoices for us. And half of the funds, half of the annual allocation will go out to the community colleges based off our discussions with the community colleges. They prefer that half of the allocation be sent to them. Then after they do their reporting in November, December, they identify if they will be spending the second half of their allocation, or if they need to reduce it, or if they need to request more. So we have a process that we put in place that after reporting, we'll communicate with them. They'll be able to request, reduce, or keep it the same. And from there, then we'll give the second allocation out. So we're excited, we're ready to move forward, and we've just got to get them the money and let them start.
right? Commissioner Alide, did you have a question?
I did have a question on the previous. I don't think you guys could see me because it was popping in and out. But it was a question on our previous one. My question was, I am a student, and when I went through FAFSA, it was very tedious this year. And MD caps, to change something that took us a lot to learn, because we have to learn it in high school. Is there any way there's going to be a testing session with certain amounts of students, so the overall population are not worrying about certain things? Even me right now, something is wrong with my FAFSA and I have to go back to change things when it wasn't a previous problem for me. And now they're you owe this amount of money, and I'm okay. So as a student, is there a way to measures for this? So as a whole, we are not struggling when we were trying to make it better for MDSys. Thank you.
Sure. So definitely, as we receive, as a vendor is selected, we've already created a user group with the FAO offices, in which they'll be prepared to look at any suggestions on their side. I could definitely work with Dr. Dow to see if she can gather some students from the student committee that they can identify or be test subjects or participate in the process as well.
I also have a follow-up question. Is there I feel on the MDSys, will there also, sorry, maybe I missed it. Will there also be a feedback portion where students could write, hey, I have a problem with this, or I wasn't able to do that, so they can have active people able to guide them through it? Is that something in that new document? I think that would be really helpful.
Yes, so that is one of the goals in which an individual will have within the student portal the ability to put a comment, and we will be aware of that comment and can respond to that comment. So it may not be, instantaneous, but at least leaves a history for us to go back and forth and communicate with the students. Also, one thing that we look for and ask for is the ability for students to schedule appointments through that new system, where they can schedule virtual appointments directly through the new system with an individual to assist them and help.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
My FAFSA was, I keep getting emails saying I haven't filled out my portion of the FAFSA when I already have, because I called them and asked them to make sure. But yeah, this year, the U.S. Department of Education, it's strange.
I think that we thank our student commissioner for her suggestion. User feedback at every stage is needed, not just the user group of people who work in financial aid, but actual students. I think getting their feedback at every stage is necessary. Once you have a vendor chosen, make sure that we are doing that. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner, again.
Any other questions or comments?
Sorry, I have another, I think something else that would be helpful for this particular something. I'm very strong about this FAFSA. Something else is that as they're building it, would it be okay for students to say, okay, this is actually hard for me? So they would able to I know we would have testing for after it is built, but sometimes even after it's built, it's though there is going to be walkthrough, if students were there to see the structure or the layout. I'm a computer science major, so the layout sometimes is difficult to use for different students. Would it be possible to have a student on board for just the layout, or is that not a possibility currently?
At this point, we don't know because we haven't selected a vendor, but we have made it a priority to have an interactive development process. So once we select a vendor, we'll make that something we can ask to see if we can implement that into the development of the system.
Thank you so much.
Other questions or comments? All right, we have two very small final items. One is Mr. Coley would like to introduce MHEC's new Director of Communications.
Chair Motz, thank you for the opportunity. Everyone, if you will please join me in welcoming Ms. Kristen Clarkson. She's our new Director of Communications, and she comes to us from the city of Bowie. She has extensive background in communications, not only from the government sector, but also with nonprofits as well as business. Kristen, are you on the line, and is your camera operating right now, ma'am?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Coley. I'm on the line and my camera's operating. Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here with the Impact team and look forward to working with all of you to make sure we get our messaging out and that our residents and students know what we have to offer and making sure they can take advantage of all those opportunities.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Clarkson, and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Motz.
Sure. The last item for our commissioners refers to a large binder that hopefully you received in the mail a few weeks ago from MHEC, the Performance Accountability Report. Dr. Dow asked me to highlight it for you all, particularly in preparation for our September meeting, which, as you remember, if you've been on this commission 10 months, is a longer meeting where we have budget conversations with the higher education institutions. It is a lot of material, and Dr. Dow's suggestion, with which I agree, is perhaps choose a few institutions to focus on. Maybe choose a couple of 2-year colleges and a couple of 4-year colleges, maybe a public and a private, to really drill down into the data and get a sense. Because I think that will serve us well when we are meeting with the colleges on their budgets in September. So that is my update from Dr. Dow. Any other? Yes.
Question. What was that in the regular mail or an electronic document?
It was in the regular, at least mine was in the regular mail, a big binder. And I think it was sent to my office. I don't know. Dr. Dow, were you involved in the mailing of that?
A little bit. Commissioner Burnham, if you have not received one, we can follow up with you and make sure that you get your binder.
Okay,
And we
I
should
don't
definitely
remember
send one
receiving
to.
it. I haven't seen it here.
Not a problem. We will follow up and make sure we have the right address for you.
And make sure we get one to Commissioner Alide too, because she's brand new.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments? All right, well, our next meeting is Wednesday, August 28th at 10. As you all know, of course, we were all virtual today because of some technology issues in the building. I don't know whether those will be resolved. Dr. Rye, if you have a sense, or we can just plan on being all remote again. Do we know the answer to that yet?
I think the new technology has arrived, and our staff needs to be trained with new technology. We are very hopeful that that will all be done, and our August 28th meeting could be hybrid again.
Okay, perfect. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Oppositions or abstentions? All right, the ayes have it. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks for a
you.
great
Good
meeting.
meeting.
Bye-bye.